Welcome back. Today we talk about the tragedies of Aeschylus. The Oresteia is one of the most important surviving works from ancient Athens. Aeschylus was one of the early developers of the dramatic stage and was responsible for much of its form moving forward. The image you see here shows Aegisthus killing Agamemnon while Clytemnestra waits behind with an axe to finish the job. It was clearly influenced by these plays, but the next image will add another element. Here we see the net wrapped around a naked Agamemnon, fresh from the bath. This is an element Aeschylus added to the account we already know from Homer. You'll recall what he said to Odysseus in the underworld in Odyssey Book 11. Anyway, this trilogy, along with the lost satyr play Proteus, about which we know almost nothing, was produced in 458 BCE. It builds on the political developments of the day, so we should explore them. So what's going on in Athens in 458 BCE when Aeschylus writes this trilogy? Under Cleisthenes, Athenian democracy, which he calls isonomia, has become more representative. This includes a new law court, the Areopagus. This was further distilled a little bit later in 463 BCE under Ephialtes into a working justice system. Aeschylus then writes a powerful trilogy just a few years later about the need for a justice system and what it meant that the world used to lack one. Aeschylus himself was quite proud of his role in repelling the barbarian hordes during the Persian invasions. He's said to have written his own epitaph, not mentioning his career as the greatest writer in Athens, just focusing on his role as a regular old soldier in the Battle of Marathon. He says in this epitaph, "Beneath this stone lies Aeschylus, son of Euphorion, an Athenian, who perished in the wheat-bearing land of Gela. Of his noble prowess the grove of Marathon can speak, and the long-haired Persian knows it well." This trilogy concerns the founding of the Athenian murder court, convened on a hill called the Areopagus, or the Hill of Ares. Supposedly, the god Ares was once judged there after he killed a human. The hill, as you see here, is a smallish outcropping on the slope of the major central hill of Athens, the Acropolis, which is Greek for the high city. This is a view from the Areopagus to the Acropolis. They're doing some reconstruction work up there, which archaeologists do not take lightly, so these things take a long time. I prefer this view downhill from the Acropolis. That little crag there that you're looking at is a spot where, I don't know, where little old Athenian couples sit together and watch the sunset. I've actually done that myself with a bag of olives and a bottle of horrible Greek wine. You occasionally see pilgrims there too, following the footsteps of St. Paul, who spoke there once. The trilogy opens in a world in which wrongdoing is punished by those wronged. What do I mean by that? A world without a justice system is a world in which blood must avenge blood. So if a family member of yours is killed, it is your responsibility, your family's responsibility to track down the killers, kill somebody in their family, a cycle of vendetta, because there's really no end. They kill you, you kill them, they kill you, you kill them. It's really mythologically most evident of the shortcomings of the system in the House of Atreus, where generation after generation, brother against brother, cousin against cousin. And so this trilogy shows the need for a stepping out of the cycle of vendetta, a replacing of private revenge with public justice. And so it becomes a civic responsibility rather than a personal responsibility, although there are religious implications of all of this as well. In the play, these cycles of killing are represented with some beautiful recurring imagery. We see a lot of hunting imagery of traps and nets, people driven into traps by their pursuers and stuck, caught in nets, unable to move, unable to do anything but continue the downward spiral. But counterbalancing that, images of light, images of darkness with light coming eventually to solve everything. Although really we don't see the real light until the end of the trilogy, but you remember the beginning of the Agamemnon where the watchman sees the light, and that's the beginning of some of the worst elements of the tragedy, but it's also the beginning of the resolution of this problem for humanity. And really the idea of a cycle is the biggest theme. The downward spiral, I said, but what I mean is that there's a never-ending cycle of retribution. Every murder necessitates another murder. And remember that with the Greeks, miasma, blood guilt, is a thing that never goes away. And so everybody involved, everybody caught in this mire of revenge killing is going to suffer. There's no way out. Although Aeschylus keeps calling in the choral odes of the Agamemnon for a learning, and so that knowledge, mathos is the Greek word. That knowledge must come from suffering, pathe mathos, from suffering, learning. This doesn't mean that you have to suffer to learn. It means that if you're suffering already, you might as well find your way out of that trap. You might as well learn something from it. I'm going to need you to recognize some important Greek terms that will keep coming up in the Agamemnon. Choros means excess, or, well, it's tied to satiety. Like, how much can you take before you can't take any more? Hubris, I hope you already know, as an English word taken from the Greek, is arrogance. You're probably thinking of it as arrogance, but in Greek it's usually tied to violence as well. So some kind of arrogant violation, some overstepping of boundaries that involves harming people in a nasty, nasty way. Maybe the most emblematic word of the first play of the trilogy is ate. Ate, doom, destruction, ruin, but also a mental doom. So delusion or foolishness, catastrophic foolishness. Ate. Your blindness to your fate is ate. What the word you'd expect me to say first is decay. Decay, justice, is what we're all hoping for, but it's not going to come out until the third play, really. From the beginning, you're going to see that Agamemnon himself is representative of, how do I describe ananke? It means necessity, ananke, necessity, but also inevitability. So it's that situation in which you have no control over the outcome. And I guess you recall that from the beginning, from before the play starts, from the situation Agamemnon is in. But let's back up a bit. There's a lot to keep straight in this horrible tale of the so-called House of Atreus. And the version we get in the first play is garbled by the ravings of Cassandra in the second best scene in the play. So I'll run you through the major horrors right now. Follow along in this family tree. The story begins with Tantalus, an early king of somewhere. He was an old friend of the gods. They used to invite him to feasts and parties, but he offended them in one of two ways. According to one story, he stole ambrosia and nectar, the food and drink of the gods, and shared them with mortals. But Aeschylus goes on with the other story, for important reasons. In this version, Tantalus tests the gods by killing and cooking his child and serving him to them. The gods immediately notice, except for one. Demeter is distracted by the absence of her daughter Persephone, so she eats a bit of the boy's shoulder. They kill Tantalus, sent him right to Tartarus in the underworld, and they reconstitute the boy. I mean, except for his shoulder, which they replace with ivory. His name is Pelops. You remember Tantalus from the underworld. He's in Tartarus, punished for eternity with tantalizing food and water, and he suffers from hunger and thirst, which, if you think about it, suggests the nectar and ambrosia story. But I guess it's a pretty impressive punishment no matter what the crime. Pelops becomes Poseidon's cupbearer for a while, if you know what I mean. When he ages out of boy-toy territory, he sets out into the world. He learns that Oenomaus, king of much of the southern peninsula of Greece, wants to find a husband for his daughter, so he signs up. He has to beat the king in a chariot race first, though. He prays to Poseidon, asking for a favor after all the cuddling, and Poseidon gives him a chariot and super-fast horses. Not fully satisfied that he'll win, Pelops bribes the king's charioteer. If he helps Pelops win, he gets a night with the princess. The charioteer replaces the king's axle pins with wax. The wheels come off, the chariot crashes, the king dies. When the charioteer comes to Pelops for his reward, Pelops throws him off a cliff. This charioteer, Myrtilus, son of Hermes, manages to curse Pelops and his entire family before drowning at the bottom of the cliff. Pelops marries the girl and inherits the rule. The southern peninsula of Greece takes his name, the Peloponnesus, or Island of Pelops. They have 2 or more sons, including Atreus and his twin brother Thyestes, who were exiled by their father for murdering their half-brother Chrysippus. They took refuge in Mycenae, where Eurystheus had ruled. He died fighting the sons of his old cousin Heracles. Atreus and Thyestes contend for the throne. Atreus discovers a golden sheep in his flock and proposes that they choose the king based on either flock's best sheep. He's pretty surprised then when Thyestes has a golden sheep in his flock, because he had been having an affair with Aerope, his brother's wife, and she had given him the sheep. Atreus plans revenge. He cuts up and cooks Thyestes' children and feeds them to him. When he reveals what Thyestes had eaten, his brother curses him and swears revenge. But he's also a guy who has eaten human meat, so he is cursed and must leave town. Atreus rules Mycenae and passes the throne to his son. According to several ancient sources, Atreus is the father of Pleisthenes, who was then the father of Agamemnon and Menelaus. I mention this only because the patronymic Atreides can mean son of Atreus or grandson of Atreus, so Homer's account is ambiguous. But there are no stories connected to Pleisthenes, so it doesn't really matter. Agamemnon gets the throne peacefully, since Menelaus gets to inherit the throne of Sparta from his father-in-law after he marries Helen. Meanwhile, Thyestes is working on his vengeance. An oracle suggests that he impregnate his surviving daughter Pelopeia, which he does, and the child Aegisthus grows up hating Atreus, and kills him in fact, and then works on seducing Agamemnon's wife while he's off fighting the Trojan War. Is that enough curses and betrayals and child killing and murder for one family? Nope. Don't forget how Agamemnon got to Troy. He had to propitiate Artemis by sacrificing his own daughter Iphigenia. Then he comes home from Troy with a war bride sex slave, the prophetess Cassandra. His wife isn't happy about that. But that's not really fair, since she was already planning to kill him, right? This is where we set our stage. Not many important characters. Actually, the chorus is a significant character in this play. All Greek cities, even before they turned to more formalized government structures, had assemblies that made decisions or advised the leaders. The chorus should best be understood as representing that group. But they're kind of there by default, since they were the ones judged already too old to fight in the Trojan War 10 years earlier. So they are the impotent old men of Argos. Clytemnestra is a fascinating character. Watch for how ancient Greek gender roles are used to describe what's wrong with her. She acts like a man, which is a bad thing in a woman. But doesn't that just mean she's strong and capable and a powerful ruler? Like with Medea, we see someone given a raw deal who then lashes out in a way that makes us uncomfortable. This discomfort is why I find Greek tragedy so compelling. But maybe we don't sympathize with Agamemnon. We already dislike him, right, from the Iliad. Knowing what's about to happen may give us some sympathy toward him, but maybe not. We have to judge him by what he says about murdering his daughter, and how much of it was the pushing of the soldiers. But think about this. The bad behavior of soldiers is often understood to come from 2 causes, situation or leadership. What do you think of this claim? Does it exonerate Agamemnon or show more of how he is to blame? You recall Cassandra's amazing wedding song in the Trojan Women. The Agamemnon scene of her raving is just as impressive, but harder to follow, and turned up a bit to evoke the horror of the situation. You know, where the same family keeps making the same mistakes, with blood and cannibalism throughout. This scene is her swan song. Watch how nobly she faces it, not counting all the screaming. The last character, well, is Aegisthus even a character? In the original myth, he kills Agamemnon and rules in his place, but that's not the Aegisthus we see in this play. All he really does is say, "Ha, got you," at the end. Consider that a major factor in how you understand the characterization of Clytemnestra. Now, how does the Agamemnon begin? Play number 1. Clytemnestra has set up a watchman to look out for signal fires from Troy. Why? Well, yeah, she needs some advance notice that her husband's on his way home, so she can finish setting the trap. The watchman is clearly no fan of the queen, but he is a good and silent henchman. A great ox is standing on my tongue. But note the irony in the "if these walls could talk" line. That is exactly what they will do when Cassandra gets there. The chorus is difficult to understand here. What is the omen they describe? 2 eagles kill a pregnant bunny, and the babies all die, grossly spilling out quick spurts of blood. Artemis has sent this omen as a warning about destroying Troy and all of its babies. Yes, they would succeed, but in exchange they will need to offer a baby of their own, Iphigenia. The chorus describes the, quote, yoke of necessity. That's really something, that phrase. Ananke, necessity, inevitability. Once Agamemnon realizes that he cannot avoid doing this thing, sacrificing his daughter, he becomes fully determined to see it through. You have to admire that sort of work ethic. But at least he's presented as not wanting to do the sacrifice, or not right away. And oh, it's a brutal scene. They have to gag her so she won't curse them as she dies. But then, at the last second, we don't hear about the throat cutting. The chorus finally breaks off in their detailed description and says, "What comes next? I cannot see it, cannot say." This is part of a long series of images of sight and blindness throughout the trilogy, and speech and silence. We cannot look at problems we need to deal with. We cannot discuss the unspeakable things that we need to discuss. So the chorus turns a blind eye to exactly the moment that we should be talking about. But they do go on to remind us why we're here. Cycles of crime and retribution lead to the repetition of the same mistakes, generation after generation. A curse burns bright on crime. Full blown, the father's crimes will blossom, burst into the sons. Agamemnon arrives. Before he addresses the chorus, he praises the gods. The battle-hungry lion leapt over the walls and feasted on the blood of kings. Whoa. But lions are problematic, aren't they? The chorus tells the story. Once a man reared in his house a lion cub. When it was gentle and friendly to children, it was always a delight to everybody, but as time passed, it showed the true temper of its breed, and returned to its foster parents' kindness by slaughtering their herds. Yeah, you don't want a baby lion in your house. And Agamemnon is calling himself exactly that. The carpet scene is complicated. Does Agamemnon implicate himself by walking on the carpet? Recognize the crime of hubris, of overweeningness, of claiming the rights of gods. Mere mortals should not walk on red carpets because of the expense of the dyes, because of the fineness of what they're stepping all over. And Clytemnestra bullies him into it. He says, no, this is not right. Don't honor me as a god, honor me as a man. And she forces him into it. She can't force him into it. Anyway, it's a complicated scene. I leave it to you whether he takes on that hubris or if it's really just an excuse, like she means it to be. And then Cassandra. Once everybody else is off stage, Cassandra basically freaks out. The chorus is there listening to her screaming and saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" It is the house that hates the gods, a witness to the murder of kinsmen, butchery, manslaughter. The floor is drenched in blood. Chorus says, What I don't see any blood. What are you talking about? Look, protect the bull from the cow. The tangling, conniving robes. She strikes. What? There's a cow? There's a bull? They just don't seem to get it. I mean, you can actually see the chorus beginning to understand after a while, but then they lose it because of Cassandra's curse. No one will ever believe her. No one will ever understand her. Over this house is a deadly chorus chanting together their ugly melodies. Note that the Furies will be the chorus in the third play in the trilogy. But what is it that she sees? What blood does she see? Yes, the bull needs protection from the cow, so she knows what's about to happen. But she also talks about the past. The the whole house has been drenched in blood since its founding, since Tantalus and Pelops and Thyestes. So it's a terribly important scene, but I mean it's moving, it's powerful. But why is it included? Do we need to be reminded of all of this story? If so, why? I guess I would say it is this background that makes this moment and the next moment in this trilogy emblematic, symptomatic of what's wrong with society. The blood from the past needed to be avenged, and now this blood will need to be avenged, and then future blood will need to be avenged. Cycles of vendetta will go on forever. And we're just repeating the history of this House of Horrors. And so Clytemnestra kills her husband and then comes out to explain it. Pretty good defense, right? I've been preparing this for so long, this trial of an ancient vendetta. You're going to condemn me, but what charges did you ever bring against him? For all he cared, he might as well have been killing an animal when he killed my daughter. He had plenty of sheep to choose from, but he sacrificed his own child, my labor of love. She mentions that he brought home a war bride concubine, and that he had had another concubine before that. Relevance, I guess. She declares herself basically a fury. I am the age-old spirit of vengeance in the guise of this dead man's wife. I have repaid the debt of Atreus, the giver of that obscene banquet, and I have sacrificed this full-grown victim in payment for the slaughtered young. Wow, that's a little on the nose. She's tying herself to the cycles of vendetta and vengeance and bloodshed throughout the history of the house. So what does the chorus have to say? Are they convinced? Blame is met with blame. It is so hard to decide between them. The plunderer plundered, the killer killed, but while Zeus sits on the throne, the wrongdoer suffers. That is the sacred law. What the chorus is doing is conflating two different forms of law. The older Furies born of earth and blood and their law that you have to get vengeance, you have to draw blood for blood, an eye for an eye, with Zeus's justice. Somebody does wrong, they have to be punished. But is there some way to separate these two? This is what the trilogy asks. But first, let's back up a bit, because she gives a full account of the killing. Words, endless words, I've said to serve the moment. Now it makes me proud to tell the truth. How else to prepare a death for deadly men who seem to love you? How to rig the nets of pain so high no man could overleap them? I brooded on this trial, this ancient blood feud, year by year. At last my hour came. Here I stand, here I struck, and here my work is done. I did it all. I don't deny it, no. He had no way to flee or fight his destiny. Our never-ending, all-embracing net. I cast it wide for the royal hall. I coil him round and round in the wealth, the robes of doom. And then I strike him once, twice, and at each stroke he cries in agony. He buckles at the knees and crashes here. And when he's down, I add the third last blow, dedicated to the Zeus who saves the dead beneath the ground. I sent that third blow home in homage like a prayer. Note that she talks in terms of nets and traps. This is the same language of compulsion and no way out that we've seen throughout the play. She wraps him up in a net or a bathrobe or something, or the red carpets, and she kills him. And this may be one of the most beautiful scenes in Greek literature. He went down, and his blood flew everywhere, great sprays of it, and I stood there bathing in it, like when the spring rains come from heaven and flowers sprout up, bathed by the rain. My lord is home at last. The speech, when I've seen this performed, the actresses or actors playing Clytemnestra all seem just thrilled at this image of her husband's blood pouring all over her, almost like she's aroused by it. And so we judge. What is Clytemnestra? Monster? Victim? A little bit of both? I mean, there's some character development. Her actions are monstrous, but because she started out as a victim, her daughter was murdered horribly. We get a different idea from her, the way she deals with Cassandra, the way she deals with the red carpet. She's definitely setting a trap, manipulating, and I don't know, trying to get away with something. But I don't know. I would sum her up as tragic, as a perfect tragic character, because she's trapped. How is she trapped? Her daughter has been killed, and she lives in a world where it's up to the girl's family to get vengeance. But her father did the deed, so he's not getting revenge. So Clytemnestra herself has to do it. I mean, she also hates the guy for what he did, so it's easier for her than it will be for Orestes. But recognize that yet again, a family member of somebody has been killed. Somebody is going to have to get vengeance. So the tragedy here is in the inability of the participants to get out of the cycle. But I don't know, at least she's not like we see in the underworld in the Odyssey. At least she's not just the seduced wife watching while some other guy kills her husband. You have to respect Clytemnestra in this play. She demands that. She earns it. Especially when compared to Aegisthus. What do we think of Aegisthus? He shows up after she explains killing her husband. He mentions his father and how he's part of all of this long planned murder to get vengeance for that feast of children. And the chorus isn't really having it. They mock him. They call him a woman, which is, oh yeah, that's adorable. They even point out, you didn't even do it yourself, Aegisthus. You're just standing in the background. Almost like they suddenly respect Clytemnestra, the one they described as having man-like hands manipulating. So they call him a coward. Clytemnestra says, don't worry about those old men. We don't care what they think. And the impotence of the chorus is fully established. The old men of the town have no power to oppose Clytemnestra. They talk about it. They suggest they might do something, but they don't in the end. They just go back home. But they pray for Orestes. Oh, Orestes, if he still sees the light of day, may good fortune bring him home. May he kill this pair and be the final victor. Recognize what they're praying for. They're praying that Clytemnestra's son come back and kill her. So they're part of the problem. They don't see how that's a continuance of the same cycle of problematic murders. Throughout in this play and the rest of the trilogy, we see symbolism playing out the clashes of ideology. Some of it is stupid, man versus woman, and chaos. A city ruled by women is chaotic and violent. Do you remember Hesiod? Gaia and the female power of chaos versus the new male-centered rule of law. The Furies are from the old Earth Mother female power form of religion and cosmic order. Justice will be an element of the Olympians' rule, coming in to replace vengeance, even though it was implicated with it a while ago by the chorus. A few more images from ancient pottery. As I've mentioned, Clytemnestra usually just kills Cassandra, not Agamemnon, whom Aegisthus, his cousin, kills. Here's another one you can see, but in both of these scenes, you see Clytemnestra with that axe. I love that she always has that axe in her hand. Aegisthus stabbing Agamemnon, who seems to just be sitting there. Sitting on his throne is how he's sometimes described, not in a bathtub, the way his wife does it. And so I have a few questions for review. Obviously, we're already stepping in the first one. The account in the Odyssey, Agamemnon tells us that Aegisthus killed him and his wife helped, and she was so horrible she didn't even close his eyes. So what is the difference here? The fact that Clytemnestra does it herself is huge, especially in terms of the retribution that we're going to expect in the next play. So why does she hate Agamemnon so much? We know why Aegisthus is involved in the murder. I mean, he was born of incest to avenge his father. Why does Clytemnestra hate him? Well, he killed Iphigenia. He brought home Cassandra. Well, it's not much to that. And of course, she's, sleeping with his cousin. Wants to get rid of him. What kind of foreshadowing do we see? The foreshadowing throughout the play is all, I mean, it's just there, what's going to happen, and the characters all seem to know, and they keep hinting at it in various ways. But a lot of the foreshadowing is symbolic. The red cloth, the imagery of nets, and if these walls could talk. How would you describe the chorus now that you've thought about their little clash at the end of the play with Clytemnestra and Aegisthus? They're the old men of Argos. They've been the old men of Argos for the last 10 years while the younger men were off fighting. Dissatisfied and a little bit sexist about the whole queen thing, but in the end, impotent. How is Iphigenia's death a sacrifice? We talked earlier this term about what sacrifice means, like what makes a good sacrifice, what makes a good offering. That it's being given to Artemis to make up for all of the future babies of Troy who will never be born, means it has to be the young of one of the generals. So Agamemnon is offering someone he loves. I don't want you to think of him as not caring about the girl child and just happily going along with it. But he does go along with it, unhappily. Actually, I should add one other point about Iphigenia. According to one ancient telling, Iphigenia was not the daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. Do you recall how the hero Theseus kidnapped Helen when she was very young, too young to marry, but her stories of her beauty had come around, and Theseus abducted her, and he was tracked down by her brothers Castor and Pollux. According to one story, she was pregnant by then, and the child was given to her married sister to raise. Think about that, what that would mean for Agamemnon's killing Iphigenia and Clytemnestra's avenging her. This is a girl who is Clytemnestra's blood either way, but might not be the daughter of Agamemnon. I only bring this up to complicate matters, not because it's an important variant story. So, how is Clytemnestra characterized throughout the Agamemnon? I think we've covered that notion that she acts like a man, she's powerful like a man, she's self-reliant, and that's somehow a bad thing. Oh, number 7. What is Agamemnon's hamartia? First of all, Aristotle is wrong about drama. Agamemnon doesn't need a tragic flaw. Agamemnon's tragedy is what he called the yoke of necessity, or what the chorus called that. But if you want a tragic mistake, maybe it's that he did walk on the red carpet eventually, talked into it by his wife. Why does Cassandra willingly enter the house? How is she a sacrifice? She knows she's going to die. She really has nothing left to lose at this point. And she's finally seeing through what she talked about in the Trojan Women. She's going to watch the great enemy of Troy get killed. So number 9, of course, is all about that question of the agency of the chorus. They're horrified that their king has been murdered, but they don't do anything about it. How does the past affect the present of Agamemnon? Ooh, duh. I guess that's the most obvious thing, the whole House of Atreus thing. Well, let's look at number 9 for a second. They did try to exile her. They did threaten justice, but in the end they did nothing. They wished they were dead. They then importantly suggest that the spirit in the house, the curse in the house, could raise up another avenger for her. But no, they still do nothing. Next time, the plot thickens in the libation bearers, in which the murder of Agamemnon will need to be avenged. And then in the third play about the Furies, the avenger will also need to have his blood guilt expiated. See you next time. Thank you.